How are you? This afternoon, the UN's General Assembly meeting getting underway right here in New York City. Already Iran's nuclear ambitions, of course, once again stealing the show. Heck, if you're looking for some warmongering, there's nothing better than a bunch of people whose names you can't pronounce really far away talking about bombs that could kill people. It makes you want to just go on and get yippee-ki-yay'd up and go to war. Over the weekend, President Ahmadinejad proclaiming the future belongs to Iran. He likes to play along, of course, saying the United States must recognize the country's, quote, big power. But he insists Iran isn't working on a nuclear bomb. If they wanted one, he says, we are brave enough to say that we want it. No doubt more gems to come on Thursday when Ahmadinejad addresses the assembly. You know, the whole devil routine. We've been through this. It's great drama, great theater. I'm not sure how much it actually factors into our Middle East or American reality, but what the heck. Meantime, the U.S. not buying the rhetoric and keeping pressure on Iran to come clean about its nuclear program. President Obama saying today that all options are on the table in dealing with Iran. Iran currently under 4 sets of UN sanctions, in fact, for refusing to stop enriching uranium and rejecting other UN demands. Uncooperative for sure, but just how dangerous are they? Or is it really just a distraction from the real issue? U.S.-Saudi relations and the percolating religious war that has been there for decades between Israel and their Arab neighbors. Joining us now, Salon.com columnist and friend of the show, Glenn Greenwald, and from Washington, the president of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies, Cliff May. Cliff, welcome back. It's very nice to see you. We have got Glenn in country. We'll begin with you, sir. Iran in context of the underlying issues of the Middle East. Is it a problem? Should we be going to war with them? Are they going to nuke us? Or is it simply a distraction from actually much bigger issues?
Well, I think what you see is that every time Ahmadinejad comes to the United States, you have the same repetitious dance that benefits extremists in both countries. You have the faction in the United States that wants the Americans to be in conflict with Iran, to go to war with Iran, that seizes on Ahmadinejad's crazy inflammatory statements, while Ahmadinejad benefits politically at home when the entire world, when the Iranians perceive that the entire world is... So
Ahmadinejad wins to appearing to be standing up to America.
And the extremists in America win by doing what they did in the run-up to the Iraq War, which is ratcheting up the fear levels and saying, look at this bad man in the Muslim world pursuing nuclear weapons, we have to go to war with
them. Do you
them.
not then also get to avoid the reality of the U.S. relationship with Saudi Arabia and how dysfunctional that spreads throughout the totality of the Middle East? We all know where the 9/11 hijackers come from. We all saw the most recent arms deal, et cetera, or for that matter, from the Israeli-Arab relationship. And allowing us to go to war with Iran lets us avoid the real problems, no?
Well, those are the two hypocrisies that the rest of the world realizes that the American population often doesn't, which is we pretend that we're concerned about Iran's internal policies towards their people, and yet our best friends in the Muslim world, including the Saudis and the Egyptians and many others, are infinitely worse in terms of their tyrannical behavior. And then, of course, Israel is always at the center of all of this, because while we, lecture the Muslim world that they cannot get nuclear weapons, that Iran cannot get nuclear weapons, we protect Israel that has a huge stockpile of nuclear weapons, that refuses to submit to any inspections, to be a part of the NPT, and the entire Muslim world sees that we enable Israel's nuclear weapons while pretending to be so concerned about nuclear weapons in general.
So, Cliff, what do you say? How much of a real problem is Iran, and how much is Iran a way for the rest of the world, not just America, but so many in the interests in the world, to avoid dealing with the U.S.-Saudi relationship and the Israeli-Arab relationship?
Boy, I think you guys are so far off, but I guess that's why you have me here. Iran, 31 years ago, launched a revolution that was not just against the Shah, but was against the West. And since then, they've been saying, this regime has been saying death to America. Now, you can be concerned about Iran and Ahmadinejad and what he might do when he has nuclear weapons, if he has nuclear weapons. You can be concerned about the severe oppression of the Iranian population by this regime, particularly after the blatantly false elections they had a couple of years back. And you can be concerned about the fact that Iran, under this regime, has said very clearly it wants to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, and Israel feels that it has a need to try to defend itself from neighbors, all of whom are sworn to its destruction, by which I mean Hamas, Hezbollah, terrorist organization, proxy of Iran, has killed more Americans than any other terrorist organization other than Al-Qaeda. We have to deal with the problem of Iran. Israel has to deal with the problem of Iran. I think you heard the President Obama doing fairly well.
So does that mean we go to war? When you say deal with the problem, so if we're going to ignore U.S.-Saudi, we're going to ignore Arab-Israeli, should we just go kill all the Iranians? I mean, let's fire this thing up? What's the plan?
Yeah, nobody's saying. If you look at what President Obama was saying and what he's actually done, he is trying to solve this in a way that will not require military force. That's why the UN sanctions are toothless.
Did Iraq require military force? In retrospect, who's to decide what's required? In other words, I take issue with the suggestion that some hand of God can decide when military force is required, when we've just blown. Do we have the graphic of all the dead people that in Iraq from American bullets for a war that was apparently required until we found out it wasn't?
I'm not as anti-American as you apparently are.
No.
You think the problems in Iraq
you're maybe the most anti-American guest I've ever had, Cliff, because your willingness to portray America out of context in a way that proceeds to advance the interest of your desire to create conflict in Iran
I'm not trying
could not be more anti-American. In fact, I consider myself to be the most patriotic person sitting at this table insofar as at least I'm willing to try to address the reality of America's relationships in the Middle East, who we fund, what they do with the guns that we sell to them, how they treat their women, instead of pretending that some other person whose name I can't pretend wants to kill me for the past 30 years when Iran hasn't expressed a single threat against America or the West outside of Israel, as far as I can tell, since the beginning.
Dylan, death to America is something of a threat, even though you don't think so. And I'm glad you feel good about yourself. But the fact of the matter is, what I'm trying to get across to you is that what Obama's done is actually rather useful, or could be. He is trying to use serious sanctions passed by a bipartisan majority in both houses of Congress to put serious pressure on Iran to end its drive for nuclear weapons, to stop its oppression of its own people, and to discontinue threatening Israel with another Holocaust.
So how does that help us with the oppression in Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and the balance of the Middle East, where they use our guns and our money to do it?
You are absolutely correct.
Should we put sanctions on Saudi Arabia?
You know, Saudi Arabia
we just sold them $60 billion in guns.
Tell me when you're finished with your question so I can begin an answer. If you're not finished yet, I'll let you do three more.
Should we sanction Israel, too, for their nuclear stockpile? Should we sanction Israel for their nuclear weapons stockpile that they won't allow?
This is absolutely this is a festival of moral equivalence. Israel is under attack, and you don't want it to be able to defend itself, whereas Iran has threatened Israel that it will wipe it off the face of the earth and has threatened death to America. These are the same to you. You seem to have some heroic notion of Ahmadinejad that I don't understand.
That's not true.
As for Saudi Arabia, as you do to me, as for Saudi Arabia,
I'll get you back. I'll get you back.
Barely.
Just look at the facts as far as who the aggressive powers are here. What you can pick up a newspaper every day and see Israel threatening to bomb Iran. You can see newspapers every day advocating that the United States bomb Iran. Iran looks to the east and the west and sees the American military occupying two countries on either side of it.
But isn't Iran just a distraction? Isn't Iran just a distraction from the Israeli relationship with the Arabs and the American relationship with its allies in the Middle East? So we point to our enemies to avoid the obvious. I mean, that's real. That's my question, Cliff. Where am I wrong in that?
Yeah, no, it's not a distraction, though Saudi Arabia is absolutely a problem, as you're right, because the Saudis have spent billions of dollars in oil wealth to spread their version of Islam, Wahhabism, which is a fundamentalist and dangerous version, around the world. Now, what you should understand is that there is a rivalry between Saudi Arabia and Iran for domination of the Muslim world.
I understand that.
There's no question about that, but both are dangerous to us, and this idea that Glenn has that the poor Iranian regime, Ahmadinejad, are being victimized by people like me and by the Israelis, and I guess by Obama as well, since he said that Iran under this regime, having nuclear weapons is a bad idea.
You're dodging my question
absolutely
again, Cliff. What
is your question, sir?
To what extent is Iran a distraction?
Not
from
at all.
The fundamental
0%.
issue of the U.S. relationship with Saudi Arabia, which is, by my observation, corrupt and destructive, and the Arab relationship with Israel. Those are the two problems, correct?
Yeah, here. And the answer, I want to be clear that I'm answering a question. It is not a distraction. These are separate questions, and in foreign policy and national security, you sometimes have to juggle more than one ball at a time.
Understood.
That's what we have to do.
You also have to be honest about the sequence of events. In other words, if we say, well, Iran funded the Sunnis, but we ignore the fact that America invaded Iraq for no reason while Israel has nuclear weapons. In other words, I'm not trying to be difficult,
right now,
but can't you kind of pick whatever you want? If you eliminate the fact that the CIA paid for this and that we give them money for that and the Russians did this, and then you act, oh my goodness, look at these terrible people. Well, out of context, maybe, but in context, you kind of like...
In context, the fact of the matter is the Iranian regime is paying for the killing of Americans in Afghanistan. In context, the fact is that the Iranians supplied IEDs to their own proxy militias in Iraq to kill Americans.
After we invaded the country countries on either side of them for no apparent reason. In the case of Iraq, if somebody invaded Canada and North America, I would in Mexico, I imagine the U.S. would fund the insurgency to get the invaders in Canada out, which is, I'm sure, how America's perceived in Iraq relative to Iraq.
America is not perceived like that.
It's almost
America did not invade for no reason. You can say, Dylan, you can say that.
Dylan, you can say the United States, and it's almost impossible to count the wars that the United States and Israel have started over the last decade. You have to go back many, many decades, centuries, to find a time when Iran invaded another country or started a war. And so this warmongering that takes place is all based on the same kind of fear-mongering that led us into the disaster of Iraq, and they want to repeat that in Iran now. And that's
Glenn,
what this is about.
How am I warmongering when I support President Obama and the sanctions, which is a way to peacefully...
What happens if the sanctions fail? Do you think the U.S. should attack Iran to stop their nuclear weapons program?
We have a big problem if the sanctions fail.
Should we attack Iran? Should we attack Iran in that case?
I agree with President Obama.
Why can't you answer that? Should we attack Iran in that case if sanctions don't work?
I think we should. I think President Obama is right.
You think we should? Exactly. That's what makes you a warmonger. You want to attack Iran, even though they're not attacking us, just like you wanted to attack Iraq,
what do you think,
even though they didn't attack us. That's what a warmonger is. People who want aggressive wars.
Thank you, Glenn, for telling us what a warmonger is. Now, you tell me, when the Iranian regime says death to America and writes death to America on missiles,
these are sticks and stones, Cliff. Are you honestly telling me that you want American soldiers and hundreds of billions of dollars and human life bloodshed by the hundreds of thousands of individuals because they called you a name?
You sound like a 6-year-old.
With all due respect, if the best you've got is that you got some people that said death to America, I feel bad even beating up on you about it.
You should, because death to America written on the side of a missile is not name-calling. It's a kind of threat. And when they say death to Israel and we're going to wipe Israel off the face of the earth, they're threatening another genocide. Now, that may not concern you. You may think that's not a problem, but happily, most Americans watching Ahmadinejad on TV understand that. Glenn may think that America...
We'll pick it up, but what concerns me is the use of my tax money to fund American soldiers and American weapons that are used by Middle Eastern powers that use that power to subordinate other Middle Easterners who are much poorer that we would claim to defend in one country, and we're happy to give the guns to the king in another country so we can do the same thing. And the hypocrisy, I believe, is at the root of this problem in the Middle East, period.
Hypocrisy and American belligerence is the root. That's your view, and that's Glenn's view.
I didn't say that. I said hypocrisy across the board, not just American belligerence. I said hypocrisy, period, in the American relationship, in the Israeli relationship, in the Iranian relationship, period. And if America can't admit its own hypocrisy and its own bankroll in funding that hypocrisy, it is impossible, I believe, for us to actually solve this problem. It's a pleasure to see both of you. I hope, Cliff, you feel you got enough of an opportunity to articulate your views. It was, as we knew, it would be spirited, especially with Glenn here from Rio. And I had a good cup of coffee today. What am I going to tell you? It's good to see you, Glenn. I hope you do come back, Cliff. I'll see you soon.